My name is Noel McDonough, and I'm the Director of Content Operations for Information Design and Development. And what that means is I manage all the content management systems and information development tools for the creation of technical content. So before we started to use the SDL technology, we had many challenges. That we had multiple writers and content developers using a variety of different types of tools with no standards and no governance. A lot of inconsistencies in terms of how content was created. And as we started to release new content and needed to make changes, there would always be last-minute changes that required an enormous level of effort by everybody to get those in line with the release of our products. Yeah, so why we looked at a CMS is we were a technology company that released products on a frequent basis. There was a lot of reuse that were happening across the products because each product had its own specific entities, but there was a lot of generic information that was going across that. From a standpoint of compliance, we needed to ensure that compliant information was consistent. Branding was also a big consideration to manage that and ensure that was consistent. So we needed a system that was going to be more component-based, and that is where we looked at SDL as being a lead, and that was going to really help us get an advantage in terms of the release of the product. We release products 2 to 3 times a year, and that way it could ensure that we were in line with the release of the rest of the products. So once we started with the SDL products, that facilitated a lot of best practices and changes within our organization. We're able to standardize on one process. We're able to take a lot of the design and look and feel of content out of the hands of the writers, which facilitated a large productivity change for the organization. And it also facilitated us getting content out the door a lot faster. It took us from start to finish somewhere between 9 months to 12 months to do the full implementation. And when we talk about implementation, that just didn't all involve the technology aspect of it, but also involved some best practices and change management. And the change management activities probably took a little bit longer than the technology aspect, but we found that that was probably key to our success, that we did invest as much time in that aspect of things as we did with the technology. We set up training for our organization. We talked to some of our partners and other industry individuals to determine what their best practices were. Then we determined that it would be effective for us to set up a knowledge base of best practices. And we defined that and implemented that before we implemented the content management system, so that the users would have a repository to reflect upon as they were doing the implementation. And once again, that helped also as much with the success of the implementation. We require collaboration between our technical authors and our subject matter experts on a regular basis. When we started this project, we also had to educate the subject matter experts about what we were doing, why we were doing it, the values that they would benefit from. So on a regular basis with our projects, there is that continuous interaction between those two sets of individuals to ensure the success for each deliverable. So before we did the implementation, not alone did we bring the technical writers up to speed with what would be involved for them from a change management process, but we also needed to interact with all our stakeholders. And the stakeholders involved the marketing organization, the engineering organization, the program management organization, and also the executives, so that they could understand what that change was going to mean and the benefits that would bring to the organization as well. And we continue to do that now because we continue to run into new individuals. They're not very familiar with the technology and the approaches that we adopt. So the more they are familiar with that, the more buy-in that we get from them and the more productive we tend to be. So we saw benefits pretty quickly. From the initial release, we actually had a before we did the implementation, we actually had a product release, and about 5 minutes before the product was to release, we had to go back and edit all of the changes and change the entire product name of the full release across thousands of pages of documentation. With the implementation of the SDL solution, we were now able to do that within 5 minutes and change all of the product names instantaneously. So that showed a direct benefit really quickly. It reduced the pain quite significantly to our technical writers because they didn't have to stay up all night making those changes for a release. Marketing was quite happy with that. So that was one benefit that we saw pretty quickly. The other benefit that we saw pretty quickly was how we could do the translation very quickly and push that out from a centralized system and then get the translation and pull it back, and then also generate those localized versions for our product. The other place we were able to see some of the benefits was in the speed with which we could push out the content to our support site, so it would be available for the customers very quickly. And then the consistency that we had across all of the releases, that they all looked the same, felt the same, and had all the branding requirements across the board. So findability is a key factor for what we do at the moment. So it's good to have good quality content, but if our customers can't find the content, it has a big impact. So you may as well have no content as opposed to not being able to find the content. So we spend a lot of time right now looking at the findability and looking at the titling of our documents. Having that as component-based and topic-based really addresses the need, because a customer can get an answer to their question now as opposed to finding a document where that answer might reside. And that has a lot of impact to us. Now our customers can be more self-serving and can answer their own questions as opposed to calling our support organization. And every time they call our support organization, that is a direct cost on the entire organization. So since the implementation of the SDL solution, we've actually increased the volume of content rather than reduced the amount of content that we've had. And that's really due to the flexibility of SDL, because we can generate and output the content in many more formats than we could previously. Whereas before we might have generated one document where we tried to have all the content in there. Now we can output into the PDF and HTML and the online help. So that's 3 different versions of the same piece of content. Okay. And we're not as concerned now of managing just individual documents. We're looking at more of, are we providing the right level and right quantity of content to our users? So we not only manage English content, and English is the source of most of everything that we do from a technical aspect, but we also manage all the translated content within the SDL solutions right now. So we have the CMS, which manages the creation of the technical content, and then we have our connection to the translation management system where we push our content out and then ingest all the translated versions of that content. And that content then is managed back in the CMS so that we can generate that output then again for our support site, so we can have multiple versions available for our customers in the various locales that we reside in throughout the world. So before we did an implementation, we also built a business case that took into account the cost of the system, the licensing cost of the system, the level of effort it would take for doing the implementation, and then the returns in business. That required us to go in front of the executive team and present that to them. We were able to show a very high return without getting into the specific numbers on that, and that we could pay that back within less than a year. That meeting took about 15 minutes, even though it was scheduled for an hour, once they saw some of the numbers.